I'd say just turn now. Oh, it's 7 now. So
Yep. All righty. Well, hey, what's up? This is Mr. Ippolito. And just in case we haven't gone live yet, okay, now, hello, what's up? This is Mr. Ippolito, and welcome to Mr. Ippolito's Quarter 1 final exam review YouTube live study session. Very excited to have you here. Before we jump into the history, if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself in the chat, if you want to just tell me your name, I would love to give you a shout out and say hello and welcome. So if you want to throw your name in the chat, especially since some people their names in the YouTube chat are not their actual names that I know you by. So I would love to call you by your real name. So if you want to just throw your name in the chat and say hello, good evening, whatever you want to say, please go ahead and do so. I also want to remind you to please keep your comments in the chat polite, please keep them respectful, and please keep them relevant and on topic, because the last thing we want to do is have the chat spammed by a bunch of stuff that is not going to be helpful for us for our final exam. Speaking of help, I want to give a huge shout out to my friend, Mr. McMahon. I am in his classroom right now. I am in Hanford, California. This is in Central California. I was doing a workshop up in Northern California, and I didn't realize that I was going to be teaching my workshops for as long as I was. And so it dawned on me that I'm not going to get home in time to start this at 7 o'clock. So I reached out to my friend who actually, he was right there presenting at the conference with me, Mr. McMahon, right here from Hanford West High School in Hanford, California. And he very graciously offered his classroom. So I am coming to you from another teacher's classroom this evening. So big shout out wherever, there's Mr. McMahon right over there. He's just quietly getting work done. So I'm going to give Mr. McMahon a shout out. Maybe at the end, he'll pop on camera and just wave to my students and their families. So thank you again to Mr. McMahon. Okay. Going to give a quick shout out. And by the way, if you have not yet responded to the poll, you're welcome to respond to the poll in our YouTube chat. The question is, which best describes your feelings about our Quarter 1 exam? So is it excited? Let's go. Feeling somewhat optimistic, a little nervous, or slightly terrified? You can go ahead and respond to that poll right now. I also want to give a shout out to, since it's the time of shout outs, to my wife, Mrs. Ippolito. She is joining me and helping to moderate, as well as my wonderful daughter, Libby Ippolito, who is a sophomore at Canyon High School. Libby is a veteran moderator. She's been on the chat. Gosh, Libby, I feel like since you were probably in like 5th or 6th grade, you've been doing this for a while. Libby, do you want to say hello from behind the scenes?
Yeah, hi everyone. It's great to be here. I am also a Riverhawk, a proud Riverhawk, so I'm happy to be here.
Right on. Libby, thank you. All right, so in addition to shouting out my daughter Libby and my wife, Mrs. Ippolito, we're also going to give a shout out to Tom. So hello, Tom, welcome. Cowan Dudley, I'm not sure who you are, but I'll give you a shout out as well. Charlie, welcome. Liam, Sarah, Charlotte, welcome. Obi-Wan Kenobi's lightsaber, whoever you are, welcome. Gabriel, hello. Henry, Charlie, yes, Charlie, I know you, Charlie. And Cameron, very good. All right. Well, thank you so much to everybody who's jumped in and who's joining. And if you're too shy to type in the chat, then that's okay. I'm going to go ahead. I also have my phone here where I'll be checking if you're having any difficulty at all with the YouTube chat. Occasionally, if you have like parental controls or something and you can't chat in the YouTube chat, you can always email me and I'll be checking my notifications on my phone as well to check to see if there's any email notifications. Okay. So I want to start off by giving another shout out. And by the way, I should mention right now, if you have questions like, Mr. Ippolito, will you please talk about this part of the study guide, or will you please go over this one more time? Go ahead and throw that in the chat right now, because I'm intentionally talking for a couple more minutes to give you an opportunity to throw some questions in the chat. So please go ahead and drop your history related, your final exam related questions in the chat now. And while you are doing that, I want to direct your attention. I'm actually going to do a quick screen share here. So I'm going to go to Google Classroom and do a brief screen share. And let's share this screen right here. And I will show you, I have a lot of Google Classrooms here. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. And I will show you that, and this is my period 1 class, but this is the same for all of my classes. So I am looking for one more short answer question on the exam to replace. I did just remove one from last year's exam. As I told you, I mentioned in all of my classes, I do kind of tinker and tweak and change my exam from year to year. So I did just remove one short answer question. I am looking to replace it with another. So if you could add, I would love to give you the opportunity to contribute to the exam. Wouldn't it be exciting if you open up the exam and your question is on it? So one short answer questions where one question where students would respond in approximately 3 to 4 sentences. What question do you think would be appropriate to see on the exam? What would excite you to see on the exam? Post your response as a comment below in the Google Classroom stream. And the author of the winning question will receive an extra credit boost on their exam. Plus, you know, I'm all about the sticker. So a Mr. Ippolito exclusive sticker. So there we go. So please contribute your questions. But we're starting the test tomorrow. So you got to contribute those questions tonight if you would like to give me a contribution. Okay. So Libby, I'm looking at the chat and I'll give a shout out to Arjun. Hello, Arjun. And I think, yes, Henry. And so the first question was from Charlie. Can you go over number 3 in the study guide, Charlie? I would be happy to go over number 3. Let me go ahead and we'll just go back to the screen share. And hopefully you can still see my face while I'm doing this. And let's go to number 3. So what were the highlights? Let me zoom in on this. What were the highlights from the Constitutional Convention? Know the story of what happened in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787. What did the founders do about the issue of slavery and the enslaved, and what compromises were made? So let's talk about this. First of all, the best place, if you're going to continue your study beyond tonight, best place is honestly to look at your notes from the Charlie Brown Constitutional Convention assignment that we did in class. If you recall, we watched the video and then we answered those questions. And then I gave you as a, it's called a Pear Deck takeaway, right? I gave you the takeaway with with all of the answers that you responded with. So essentially, if we think about it, why did they go to Philadelphia in the summer of 1787? It was originally just to tinker with the Articles of Confederation, right? So that was the original purpose. They were just going because they knew that the articles were flawed. And they thought, you know what, let's just get people in a room together and let's hope, because remember, under the Articles of Confederation, you needed to have a unanimous 13 states, 13 out of 13 vote in order to amend the Constitution. So, or excuse me, amend the Articles of Confederation. So they were hoping to bring everybody together just originally to tinker, just kind of fix those Articles of Confederation. What happened instead? They locked the doors, they closed the windows, they kept everything in secret. You remember from that Charlie Brown video. And they did something that was very controversial. They decided that they were going to take that rough draft. If you remember that metaphor of the rough draft, and they threw that rough draft out, and instead they created a brand new Constitution of the United States. And they had to keep it secret because that was awfully controversial. That was not the job that they originally came together to do, right? So what started as just a tinkering and a tweaking and a changing of the Articles of Confederation became a brand new document, ultimately a document that was going to be much stronger, that was going to be much more cohesive, right? We talk about, and you did this in the Constitution Interactive Notebook, you look at the preamble to the Constitution and, you know, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. That union, that bringing together of the states was stronger and more united. Established justice. There was no judicial branch of the federal government. There now is under the new Constitution. Established justice. Ensure domestic tranquility. Domestic tranquility, what was the biggest problem? What was the thing that pushed the founders to meet in Philadelphia in 1787 to begin with? What rebellion was it? It was Shays' Rebellion. And so that was the domestic tranquility that they wanted. They didn't want to fear, particularly the people with property, right? The James Madisons, the George Washingtons. They didn't want the mob coming to try to take their stuff or potentially harm them. And so these Revolutionary War veterans who were having their farms foreclosed on, having their property seized, taken away, the Articles of Confederation had no way to respond to that. And so in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, right? Like keep the mob under control, basically. Ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. There was, if you recall, under the Articles of Confederation, you could only raise an army in a time of war. Well, once you go to war, it's almost too late to raise an army, right? Like you need to have military preparedness in advance. The Constitution provides for that. We have armed forces that are ready at a moment's notice to defend the United States if necessary. So We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, people's general welfare. Like there was just a general sense of dread. Like, is this country even going to survive? And so the Constitution gives a greater structure and more cohesiveness to the country, and promote and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Let's focus on that phrase for just a moment. And I'm actually going to look up, because this is good stuff right here. Let's take a look at this, because I'm going over the text of the preamble, and let's just zoom in. Secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. So part of the purpose of the Constitution was, we fought this revolution. We fought against Great Britain. We came together as 13 separate colonies that then became 13 separate states. And so here we put forth all of this blood and treasure. Americans gave their lives to create a free country. And under the Articles of Confederation, if this continues, that's all going to fall apart. Everything that we fought for in the revolution is going to go away. Our liberty is going to go away. Potentially, we might get taken back over by Great Britain, or taken over by Spain, or some other power. So to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, our children, our grandchildren, let's secure these blessings of liberty. The fact that we created this brand new country, let's keep it in place. Let's secure it. Let's hopefully have a United States for our children, our great-grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren. You get the idea, right? For future generations, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. In other words, we're not just doing it for us now, we're doing it for future generations. The authors of the Constitution did it for us. They did it for you, so that you would have a United States to enjoy 200 plus years in the future. I think, what are we celebrating? 235 years this year? 235 years in the future. Okay. Gosh, that was a lot to say on. Okay. And so then I think you need to know about the Great Compromise. I'm not going to go over that, but that was you remember the three things that George Washington, I'll give you a brief summary. It was the three parts of the Great Compromise: that representation would be proportional in the House of Representatives, that representation would be equal in the Senate, or the upper house, right? And that all money bills, anything that involved spending money, would begin in the House of Representatives. And then finally, what did the founders do about the issue of slavery and the enslaved? What compromises were made? So you should know all about the 3/5 compromise. And again, if I go into too much detail, we're never going to have time to answer all of your questions. So I'm going to try to speed things up here. Know the 3/5 compromise, and you should also know, and this is from that handout that you got on the U.S. Constitution and slavery, and that is, let me just show you what that looks like. So U.S. Constitution and slavery. Whoops, I just had it. There we go. It's this reading right here that is about to pop up on the screen. It's this one right here. So you did a graphic organizer, and it asked the question, should enslaved people be counted as part of the population? That was the 3/5 compromise there. What should be done about the slave trade, the international slave trade? The framers decided that it would be abolished after 20 years. So in 1808, the slave trade would end under the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, by the way. And then finally, do states have a responsibility to return escaped slaves? All three of these questions were answered in the Constitution. So you should know the answers to all three questions. We didn't really talk too much about this in class, but you should understand this. And if you need to go back and read this, then go back and read this. Okay. I think that is all I need to say about number 3. Libby, have questions been pouring in?
Yes, we have 3 questions. The first question we got after the one you answered was, I thought only the president could declare, but according to the booklet, the legislative can as well. Can you explain that?
Yes. So in terms of constitutional powers, war powers, the Congress is the only branch of the government. Legislative branch is the only branch that is authorized to declare war. However, the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And so sometimes we enter a little bit of a gray area into how much authority, how much military authority does the president of the United States have before he has to ask Congress for permission. So the War Powers Act of 1973, well, we're getting really in the weeds right now, which was during the Vietnam War under the presidency of Richard Nixon. Congress was upset that Richard Nixon and presidents preceding him, right? Lyndon Johnson before him, President John F. Kennedy before him, they were escalating the Vietnam War beyond what Congress wanted. Vietnam, we never declared war in the Vietnam War. The last time we actually formally declared war, Congress issued a declaration of war. The last time that happened was in 1941 for World War II. That was the last time we officially declared war. So since then, we've been involved in the Korean War. That was never really a formally declared war. It was just it was a police action. We joined in with the United Nations. The Vietnam War, the war in Afghanistan, the Persian Gulf War, the Iraq War, like all of these wars, we call them wars, but they were never actually declared wars. They were just military actions that were taken by the President of the United States, given some authorization by Congress, because Congress needs to authorize the money to pay for the military action. So the official constitutional answer is only Congress has the power to declare war. But does the president have some limited authority to deploy troops if necessary in a crisis? Yes. Under the Constitution and under the War Powers Act of 1973, yes. But the president has a limited amount of time before he needs to go to Congress, explain his actions or her actions, and ask for money, right? So, Charlie, hopefully that answers your question. Libby, what's the next thing?
Yes. So the next thing is from Alina, and they asked, what was the purpose of the preamble?
Alina, great question. And actually, we were just having that conversation on the preamble. So the purpose of the preamble, and because I love the preamble so much, we'll just go ahead and we'll pull up that preamble. The purpose of the preamble is to set up the Constitution. It's to tell the American people, to communicate to the people of the United States, this is why we closed the doors and shut the windows in Philadelphia from May through September of 1787. And it was hot and it was humid and it was miserable. But this is the reason why we are switching. We're taking that rough draft of the Articles of Confederation and throwing it out and replacing it with a Constitution of the United States. This is why, for these 6 reasons: to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, just like I talked about like 7 minutes ago, right? These 6 reasons so that we can have a country that will continue, that we can pass on to our children and grandchildren and future generations. That is the purpose of the preamble. So great question. Libby, what's the next question?
The next question is from Henry, but it was already answered, so maybe you would just want to confirm it. Will the questions on the test be the same ones from the booklet, or will they be similar and not exactly the same?
So the booklet I designed to be helpful. I think when you take the test, the booklet is designed to reward those students who played it, right, and who practiced. So there's some good stuff on there. Are they identical? No. So please don't assume that if you do well in the booklet that you're automatically going to do well in the test. But if you practice with the booklet and you practice a few times, and by the way, you may notice this morning, I did throw a few more booklets. Like it's the same questions, it's just kind of different game modes so that you can have a little more fun with that. Then you can, I believe that the more you practice with the booklet, just like the more you go over the study guide, the more you look at your vocabulary, the more you practice in whatever format you're going to practice, the more you study, the better you're going to do. And I think the booklet is a great way to go. So yes, do the booklet.
All right. The next question is from Stella, asking if you can go over number 2 on the study guide.
Oh my goodness, Stella, it would be my pleasure. All right. So let's take a look now at number 2 on the study guide, which says, looking back, we can see that the articles were doomed to fail, but why did they seem like a good idea at the time? So this is a really good question, right? Like, why is it that these really, really smart people, the same people who created our Constitution, the same people who authorized the Declaration of Independence, the same people who won our freedom, how did they come up with such a flawed document? Well, if you think about it, we were coming from a time when we were ruled by King George III, and we were ruled by a parliament that we thought was unfairly targeting us and unfairly taxing us. And so as Americans, we were really nervous about having, right after we gained our independence and we're ready to create our own country, we're really nervous about giving the central government, the central authority, too much power, right? Because what we don't want to do is rebel against a king and then create a brand new monarchy in the United States. So that's what we're really worried about. And so we intentionally, and I compare this, and I talked about this maybe in a couple of classes, I kind of compare it to a teenager. a teenager is rebelling against their parents, right? And so they move out of their house at, well, whenever you move out of your house, 18 or 19 or 20 or 25 or 30, whenever you move out of your house. Shortly after young people move out of their parents' home, some of them are like, hey, I got freedom. I could do whatever I want, and impose very few rules on themselves, like eat whatever you want, stay up as late as you want. So some young people, when they get that, they experience that freedom, they're not always really willing to put a lot of rules on themselves, right? A lot of rules or restrictions or bedtimes but then after a while, like after you've been like, oh, I should not have had Taco Bell at midnight. That was a bad idea. Oh, I should not have stayed up until 2 a.m. playing Xbox. That was a bad idea. Like you realize that you really, after a while, you kind of live on your own and you rule your own. This is sort of like the United States, the very young United States. After a while, you realize, oh, I really should have put some stricter limits on myself. I really should have kind of controlled myself a little bit better. That's what the United States experienced. They had this experience that, you know what, we really need to have, we can't just survive on a legislative branch alone. We really need a federal court system, a federal judiciary, a federal judicial branch. We really need an executive. We need one person who, in a time of crisis, can just make a decision for us. And that's where you get the executive branch from, right? So we really need more structure and more what we realize, which is what young people realize when they move away from their parents. We really need more structure and more order. So we have this, remember, order versus chaos. We had this very strict order under King George III, under the rule of Great Britain. And then we have this chaos of the Revolution and still kind of chaos under the Articles of Confederation. And then finally, at the end, you bring to the Constitution, you get there, and then we're back to order. Because in order to move forward, in order to have a country that survives, we need to have the order and structure of a solid central government, and that's the Constitution. So it seemed like a good idea at the time because we didn't want to have a lot of central authority. But why did they ultimately fail? Because you could not, and this is, so this is your, and I know I didn't put it here in the things that you can reference, your notes that you can reference, but why did they ultimately fail? And a lot of these questions are answered in the Articles of Confederation gallery walk, if you remember that activity, right? We were learning all about the different elements of the Articles of Confederation. They ultimately failed because they could not provide enough structure for the United States. There was not enough meat on the bones of the United States government for it to survive. And then how does the preamble address these concerns? I just talked about the preamble twice a few minutes ago, and ensure. So that's the answer to question number 2. So I kind of answered it a little bit about 10 minutes ago, and then the rest of it right now. And so hopefully that helps. Okay, Libby, what's next?
All right, the next question is from Tom asking for the definition. Should we search it on Google?
Okay. So for vocabulary definitions, you could, although, can I just be honest with you and tell you let me just give you a way better way to study vocab at this point. If you're at the night before the test, here's what you should do. Go into Google Classroom and click on vocab matching practice test and play the vocab matching practice test on formative. That's going to be a big help to you because that's at this point, I think that's what's going to be best for you. The other thing you could do is you could go into YouTube and you could search for and if we go into the study, let's go here, study guide and resources. And if you go to the document with everything, the stuff where I just dumped all of the lessons and everything, it's called Learning Targets and Lessons. There is a video here, a YouTube video called Mr. Ippolito Explains the Constitution Interactive Notebook Vocabulary. So if you love hearing the sound of my voice and you want to learn more about vocabulary, then you can click and watch that YouTube video. That'll help you as well. But honestly, if you're just looking for quick and dirty, how can I best at this point in time go over vocabulary? Do the formative, do the practice informative for sure. 100%. Tom, you can't go wrong. Libby, what's next?
All right, next question is from Liam asking, can you go over the 3/5 compromise?
Yeah, I will definitely do that. So the 3/5 compromise. Here's the conflict, the debate that happens during the Constitutional Convention. We're trying to decide. So we've already figured out the Great Compromise, right? So in the House of Representatives, representation is going to be based on population. And the Senate, it's going to be equal for each state. So Senate's not even an issue. So let's look at the House of Representatives. We then have to, if you dig into the Constitution, you see that we have something called a census, where every 10 years, and we just had a 2020 census, we count everybody who lives in all the states, and then we determine how many representatives each state is going to get in the House of Representatives based on that official 10-year count. Decennial, I think is how you say something that happens every 10 years, that decennial count called the census, the United States Census. So as we talked about in class previously, I showed you the maps. Remember how California currently has 53 members of the House of Representatives, but after this next election, because we had the 2020 census and then our map was adjusted and we lost a representative. So we're going to only have 52. So that count happens every 10 years. So how do we count humans? Well, they were pretty convinced that white people were just going to count. When you count 1, 2, 3, how many people live in your state? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You count all the white people. That made sense. But then how do we count the enslaved people, enslaved Black people living in the South? Well, if you're Virginia, you want to count them as a whole person, right? Because you count them as a whole person, you run up your numbers. Virginia gets more people in the House of Representatives. South Carolina gets more people. North Carolina, Georgia, you get the idea. All of those slave-owning states get a higher count for the House of Representatives if they can count enslaved people as one full person. The people in the North are like, wait a minute, that's not fair. You don't treat them as equal humans. You don't treat them as equal citizens. You don't give them any voting rights. You barely give them any human rights. You don't treat them as full people. So why should they count for the purposes of representation in the House of Representatives as full people? And so the North, the people from the North are saying, you should not count them at all. You don't treat them as real humans, as actual citizens. You certainly shouldn't count them as such. And so they argue back and forth and back and forth. And this is one of the things about the United States is we function on compromise, right? This is the way democracy works, or a representative government, a republic works, is you go back and forth and back and forth. And finally, for whatever reason, they settled on the fraction 3/5. So that, for example, if Virginia has 50,000 enslaved people, then you take that number, 50,000, and then you divide that, you take 3/5 of that, right? So divide by 5, multiply by 3. So you get, that counts as 30,000 humans for the purposes of the decennial census. And so that those 50,000 enslaved people will count as 30,000 people for the purposes of representation in Congress. That was the 3/5 compromise. So hopefully try to explain that in a way that was, hopefully that was good. Libby, was that a good explanation?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right. The next question is from Melanie, using account with the name Lisa.
Yes.
I overheard a few of my friends reciting the modern day ranking of how important the branches of government are. Was that something we should have memorized?
How important the branches of government are. Melanie, you're going to have to give me, I'm not sure what they're reciting, but if you could give me a greater explanation, because I don't know, I'm not quite sure what that means. I would say that originally under the Constitution, if we're talking about importance of the branches, I would say that the legislative branch, the Congress, because it was the only branch under the Articles of Confederation, I would say that the legislative branch was probably the most powerful right after the Constitution was written. I would say the judicial branch was probably the least powerful, and the executive, the president, was somewhere kind of in the middle. The power of the presidency has risen since then. Some might argue that the president, in some senses, is even more powerful than Congress today. And then the judicial branch, especially the Supreme Court, their power went way up when they got the power of judicial review in the Marbury versus Madison decision, which we're going to learn about in another 6 weeks or so, as we'll learn about that. So, but yeah, Melanie, if you could explain, because memorizing importance of branches, maybe there's something I'm missing on that. Okay, Libby, who's next?
All right. Next, I accidentally skipped it. It was a question from Alina saying, can we use the worksheets with our work from previous classes on the test?
From previous classes. Okay, so I believe Alina is referring to my policy that I will allow all handwritten notes, right? All handwritten notes. So if it's a handout that I've given you and you wrote on it, that's allowed. If it's a blank sheet of paper and you've written on it, that's allowed. So previous classes, like from 7th grade history, if it's your work, sure, as long as it's your handwriting, I guess. Elena, if you want to, if you're not sure, then just like bring it in before class, and I can tell you whether or not, because I'm not sure what previous classes mean. If you're talking about like previous class sessions in our class, as long as it's your work, if it's this class or another class, as long as it's your work, your handwriting, then it's allowed. Okay. And then Libby, I'm seeing from Carr, I wasn't here on Tuesday this week. Is there anything important in history I should know about? Yes, all of it. We did the review on Tuesday, but I did not teach anything new on Tuesday. um, okay. Okay. Tom is getting a little worried, I see. And then we move to Melanie, and then Libby is the next one. Annabelle.
Yes, the next one is Annabelle asking, could you go over or just quickly show the last year's final exam format one more time?
I sure can. Yeah. So this is, and again, just as a reminder, this is 2021. So this is not reflective of the final. This is not like a guarantee of what this final exam is going to look like. But yeah, essentially, if I keep the format roughly the same, it's going to be 16 multiple choice, just kind of general multiple choice from the quarter. I will tell you that probably a good 4 or 5 of these multiple choice questions are going to be on the Declaration of Independence, the core paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. So definitely focus on that and study that. I can also tell you Articles of Confederation is probably going to be about 3 questions out of this multiple choice section. So just kind of be prepared for that. Separation of powers, checks and balances, which we've talked about previously. Separation of powers is just like which branch is in charge of which branch makes laws, which branch executes the laws, which branch interprets the laws, right? That's the separation of powers. What does the legislative branch do? What does the executive branch do? What does the judicial branch do? And then checks and balances. What powers do they have over each other? Like the executive branch has the veto power over the legislative branch. The legislative branch has to approve all federal judges, so the president can't just appoint whoever he feels like to the Supreme Court. So that's checks and balances. Federal system and vocabulary, which we previously talked about. Federal system is just, is it a national power, a state power, or shared power? The Venn diagram on page 142 in the textbook is great for that. There's also, I mean, if you just Google search federal system Venn diagram or federalism Venn diagram, any of those are helpful. And then the vocab would be included in this section here. And then short answer questions, and then a couple survey questions at the end. So hopefully that helps. Libby, thank you. What's next?
All right, the next question is from Sarah asking, on number 2 on the study guide, it asks for our opinion about Thomas Jefferson's legacy. Will that be on the test? Because if it's our opinion, wouldn't it automatically be right?
So you can make a claim, certainly, Sarah, but if you make a claim, you have to back it up with, Libby, what word the beginning with letter E am I going to say? You make a claim, you got to back it up with?
Evidence.
There you go. So Libby knows as well. So yes, you can make whatever claim that you'd like, but it needs to be backed up with evidence. Will there be a question on Thomas Jefferson? Almost certainly. Will it look very similar to the prompt, the Socratic seminar prompt? It most certainly will. So if you're going to make a claim about Thomas Jefferson, whatever claim you're going to make, you just have to back it up with evidence from the class, from what we've learned, right? But it's not going to be, you're not going to have to write an essay. I'm going to limit it. So you're going to have, maybe I'm going to say, limit your response to 3 to 4 sentences or 3 to 5 sentences. And so you're going to make a claim, and then you're going to back up that claim with evidence. Okay. Libby, what's next?
All right. Next from, I don't know who their name is, but their username is Puglicia.
Oh, that's Gabriel. Yeah.
Oh, okay. For section 3 on the study guide, it says, what were the highlights of the Constitutional Convention? What do you mean by highlights?
So I talked about this previously. Highlights, this isn't like a sports recap, right? So highlights just means, it's just what I talked about previously. It's everything that we learned with that Charlie Brown video, the Constitutional Convention. Why did they come originally? Was, what the Articles of Confederation, all of that. So the discussion that I had, if you rewind this YouTube live, you rewind it back about 10 or 15 minutes when I talked about that. That's what I mean. So don't get caught up with the word highlights. It's really just like, what was the process from what motivated them to first meet in Philadelphia in 1787, and then what was the progression from there? What happened during the Constitutional Convention? So that's highlights. Libby, is that next, the ratification question?
Yes, that is next.
Okay. So Charlie says ratification means to confirm a treaty. Ratification really means to approve anything that is official and legal, right? So the states had to ratify the Constitution after it was done being written during the Constitutional Convention. So they had to accept it or they had to ratify it. So does the president accept it or does the government get together and make a decision? Oh, okay. So when it comes to a treaty, right? We're talking about the treaty power. The president or his representatives or her representatives, the Secretary of State or a diplomat, somebody, they will write up a treaty with another country or with a series of other countries, but any treaty needs to be confirmed or ratified by the Senate, right? So that's a power of the president, power of the executive branch, but it is a check that the legislative branch has on the executive branch because the president can't just enter into any treaty it wishes, right? So the president can't just say, we will buy $5 billion a year worth of maple syrup from Canada. And that's the way it's going to be. We're going to buy that. So if we're going to enter into that treaty or a trade agreement with Canada, then the Senate would need to approve that, right? So that's the ratification process of treaties. And really, we're not talking about, it's really not trade agreements or buying maple syrup. It's more of like either military or strategic alliances, those kinds of treaties that end wars. Those are really the kind of treaties that need to be approved by the Senate. Okay, Libby, what's next?
I believe the next question is from Brooklyn, who asks, are all the listed vocab terms going to be on the test? Also, how many questions will there be on the test?
Okay, how many questions? Currently, I have 30 on the existing test. I will make final tweaks and changes tonight, but currently 30 right there. And I've already gone over the delineation of those, so I don't need to talk about those again. I do want to show you this here. So I believe in class, I showed you that these are all the vocab terms that I think that you should know. And then we crossed out electoral college and due process of law, popular sovereignty and habeas corpus, because we're going to talk about those later. So when Brooklyn asks, are all the listed vocab terms going to be on? The ones that I believe that you should know are all of these, except for the ones that I crossed out in red. Next question.
Your next question is, wait, let me get it loaded up. Could you sum up all the topics on the text and would it be unit 2 only?
Oh, can you sum up all the topics? Well, all the topics are the ones in the study guide. So if this is a switcher-on's question, then yeah, sum up all the topics. And if you're saying unit 2, if you're referring to this document here, let me show you this. There we go. It's mostly, yeah. So unit 1, this is just kind of more like warm-up stuff, right? Mostly. But in unit 1, you'll notice annotating the Declaration of Independence. That is like the core paragraph of the Declaration of Independence is totally going to be on the test. Totally 100%. Yes. So that's unit 1. Thomas Jefferson Socratic Seminar, all of that, unit 1. So mostly unit 2, but also unit 1 as well. Okay, Libby, we're going to take a short break from the chat questions because I did tell students Mr. Ippolito would be checking his email, and then I should probably do that. So, all right. So, Kelly says, I clicked the link to YouTube, but I can't chat. Can you help me? Well, Kelly, send an email, and then I can answer your question. Okay. The next email question, Emmy says, I'm on the live, but my chat isn't working, but I was wondering if you can give me and Katie a shout out. I just did. Okay. Next, from Miles. Hey, Mr. Ippolito, I was wondering if you could go over number 7 on the study guide. So I'm going to write that down. Number 7 on the study guide. And then Gabriel asked, what quiz review questions will be 100% on the test? Oh my goodness. I'm not sure I understand what quiz review questions you study at all. I can't guarantee what's going to be on the test. I will tell you, if you use the study guide, and then also if you do the book it, then that's going to be really good for you. Oh, and also please do the practice vocab activity in the formative, that one that I gave you. Okay. So Libby, I think we're going to do number 7, and then we'll go back to the chat. These are all really good questions. We got 21 minutes left. Let's look at number 7. Which is, oh my goodness, where is it? Well, here's the study guide. Okay, number 7. What is the message of the core paragraph? Let's zoom in on this. Let's zoom in a little bit more. What is the message of the core paragraph of the Declaration of Independence? Know the vocabulary, the key points. So let's take a look at the Declaration of Independence. We had this conversation, I believe, in all of my class periods just recently, right? I think we just talked about this recently, but let's go over quickly again. This first section right here. We hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, obvious, easily visible, and knowable to all. Like these truths, he's about to list these truths. He's about to, boom. This is the summation of Thomas Jefferson's Enlightenment philosophy right here. We hold the following truths to be self-evident, like so obvious that everyone, even stupid King George III, should be able to understand them. Number one, that all men are created equal, which, by the way, this statement, all men are created equal, hugely controversial at the time, right? Like in an era of when humans are owning other humans, to say the statement, all men are created equal, that's pretty radical at the time. That's the first truth that Thomas Jefferson thinks that everyone should be aware of. Number two, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, rights that cannot be taken away from you. Number three, that among these rights, these aren't your only rights, but among these rights that you're born with are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Number four, that to secure these rights, the ones that we're born with, governments are instituted among men. Listen, this is Thomas Jefferson telling us the purpose of government. Why does government exist? To protect and preserve and secure our rights, the rights that we're born with, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This is another hugely radical idea at the time, because if you look at the kings and queens of Europe, who gave them permission to rule? Well, according to European belief, their reign came from God, right? Their authority to rule, it was passed down from generation to generation and ordained by God. Well, Thomas Jefferson is saying, forget that. You do not give, no ruler gets their power to rule from God. The government gets its just powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, people give the people who are being governed, the people who are being ruled, they give the government the power to rule. So power does not flow from a top-down model, from God to the monarchy and then out to the common people. Power comes from the people. The power to rule comes from the consent of the governed. And whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, in other words, if the government's not doing its job to protect and secure our rights, then it is the right of the people to alter, to make changes to, or to abolish, to get rid of, to break away, and to institute new government, right? So we have the power and authority. If government's not doing its job, if government is seizing power and usurping and abusing power, then we as the people, as the source of its power, have the right to break it or change it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. In other words, this is Thomas Jefferson saying this is our right to revolution. This is our right to overthrow the government. Prudence indeed will dictate. We've talked about this paragraph many times. In other words, we're not just throwing a hissy fit. This is not just a temper tantrum, right? Because we've suffered a long time. Experience has shown humans are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. We'll put up with a lot of nonsense. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, King George III repeatedly, over and over and over and over again, abusing his power, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. King George is a tyrant. He is a despot. He is abusing his power, and he's done this over and over and over again. And in the next section, which you don't see here, that's when Thomas Jefferson lays out like the case against King George III and all the like bad things that he's done. If there's a repeated pattern of abuse, it is their right, the people, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. In other words, those who have the power to do something have the responsibility to do something, right? Those who have the power, it's the Spider-Man rule. With great power comes great responsibility, right? If you have the power to make change, you have the responsibility to make that change. Okay. Libby. Whoa, that was a lot. You know, I get fired up about the Declaration of Independence.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Where are we now?
In the vocab, or not vocab, sorry. In YouTube, there was a quick question saying, I'm not sure if this is a mistake or not, but the due date on the vocabulary practice is 11/3/2022 at 8:10 a.m.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I'll fix that. 11/3. It should be tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, vocab. Yeah, because that should be shut down tomorrow. In other words, starting tomorrow morning, no one will have access. Informative. No one will have access to both the exam and then also the practice exam as well, because there might be some overlap between the practice and the actual vocab questions on the real exam. So I need to make sure to shut that down. Thank you so much. Okay. What's next?
The next question is from Annabelle, who says, Mr. Ippolito, how many vocabulary terms will there be in total?
Oh, I don't know. I think, okay. So just to be fair, all that vocab, it may not appear as a matching. It may appear somewhere else, right? It may like articles. Well, here, let me look at the vocabulary just so I know what I'm talking about here. So let me show you an example, share screen, and checks and balances, right? Checks and balances may or may not appear as a vocabulary term where you have to like, here's the term and here's the definition. But do you need to know what the checks and balances are? Yes, right? The 3/5 compromise. This may or may not appear as a vocabulary, like here's the term and then match it with the definition. But in a written response, might you need to know the definition of what the 3/5 compromise is? Yes. So just because when you ask the question, like how many vocab questions are there going to be? If you're asking how many matching, it'll be about the same as what's in the practice. What was that? 10? I don't know, 8, 10, 12, whatever it is. But in terms of this, I can't really exactly say like there's going to be, this many vocab terms and then nothing else is going to appear. The federal system, right? Yes, you need to know this, but do you need to know like the definition, or do you actually need to know like national, this is a national power, this is a state power, this is a shared power? That's what you need to know about the federal system. So I hope that helps. Libby, what's next? We got 14 minutes left.
All right. I missed a quick question from Gabriel asking, are we allowed to use Google since the tips and strategies says don't fall into the Google trap?
Oh, yeah, that's no, not allowed to use Google. No, absolutely not. That phrase actually is a holdover from 2 years ago when we were in quarantine and kids like, I couldn't control whether or not they used Google, right? So I changed the test so that kids could use Google, but yeah, no, absolutely not. It's paper notes only. Yeah, that's why I said that's an old document. That's a holdover from fall of 2020. Next.
All right. Elena asked a question saying, which scene from National Treasure were you talking about in the study guide on question 7, and which connects to the most important point of the declaration?
In all classes on Monday and Tuesday, we watched that scene from National Treasure. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you can go back to the study guide. It's essentially what we've already talked about. Let's go here. And if you click on the link, where is it? Right here. Most important point. If you click on this link right here, it will carry you to, we're not going to watch the YouTube video, but you can watch it. It's in the digital version of the study guide. If you were present, oh my gosh, that's loud. If you were present in class Monday or Tuesday, and Alina, you might have been absent, then you might have missed when we watched this. It's essentially a clip where it's talking about those who have the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action. So it's what we already talked about with the Declaration of Independence. That was my poor attempt at a Nicolas Cage impersonation. Next.
All right, the next question was also from Alina asking, I believe the day of awesomeness will take place during the test tomorrow. When will the makeup test be if we miss it?
If you are in my period 5 class tomorrow, that's the beginning of the day. Alina, I will talk to you. And I think I've already looked it up. There are 5 students in our period 5 class who are impacted by the day of awesomeness. So if you are one of those 5 people who is doing the day of awesomeness and has the exam tomorrow, talk to me, because you hopefully will have enough time to take the exam. But if not, then I have a special way that I'm going to help you, because you earned that day of awesomeness. So you should not be punished for earning the day of awesomeness. But yeah, so if you're one of those 5 students, we'll have a conversation tomorrow. And
Uh,
it only impacts period 5. So if you're in any other period 4, period 6, or period 1, that's not going to impact you at all.
all right, the next question is from Doreen asking, did we have any assignments on the Great Compromise? If so, could you name the assignments?
So the Great Compromise appears, first of all, in the Constitution Interactive Notebook. Don't remember off the top of my head which slide. Was also in the Charlie Brown video. And so if you're trying to go back and like, where do I find this? It's in one of the slides in the Constitution Interactive Notebook. If you go into the textbook and you just search for Great Compromise, you can find it there. Or if you look at your notes, right? If you look at your notes from the takeaway, the paired deck takeaway from the Constitutional Convention, and I am so confident that that's the best place to look, that I'm just going to show you this is period 1, but everybody has the same stuff in their Google Classroom. Paired deck takeaway Constitutional Convention. If you click on this link right here, it'll take you to your notes that you took when you watched the Charlie Brown video, and it has the 3 parts of the Great Compromise, which were spoken by cartoon George Washington, but you could also find those in the textbook as well. Okay, what's up next?
I don't know if this is a serious question or not.
Yeah.
But from Cowan is asking, hey, one last question, Mr. Ippolito.
Yeah.
Are we able to talk to Joe for more answers?
I'm not sure what I don't know who Cowan is. And so I'm not sure. Not sure. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. And hello to Jordan and hello to Daniel. They are my former students. So hey. Okay. Libby, are those all the questions on the? Oh, and yes, Melanie is correct. And Tom, can you ask Alexa for answers? No, the answer is no. Libby, I have a couple of email questions that came through. Are you allowed to use notes during the test? Yes, we've talked about this extensively. Paper notes that you have handwritten. Any handout that I've given you and you've written on, you may use that on the test. Any blank piece of paper that you've written on, you yourself have written on, you may use that on the test. I will go through and inspect all of your notes. I'll walk through. You will be required to take out. You cannot touch your backpack once the test has started. So whatever notes you're going to use have to be out on the desk so that I can inspect them and just make sure that there's nothing that's pre-printed. There's nothing that has been photocopied from someone else. No screenshots, no printouts of slides or technology or anything like that. Okay. And then, so I got that question. Mason asks, how long will we have to take the final? The entire class period. So the entire block. So I'm going to give a few instructions at the beginning, but once those instructions are done, you'll have the remaining almost 90 minutes, an hour and a half to take the test. Gabriel said, thanks for answering my question. You're welcome. What were the 3 parts of the Great Compromise? Again, representation in the Senate will be equal based on state, equal per state, right? 2 senators per state. Representation in the House of Representatives will be proportional. So proportional based on population. So big states like California get a lot of representation. Small states like Wyoming have just 1. The minimum is 1 representative per state, and there's really technically no maximum. And then the final part was that all money bills, all appropriation bills, basically, if the Congress is going to spend money, it needs to start in the People's House, which is the House of Representatives. Okay, and then what quiz review questions will be 100%? Oh, that was Gabriel's question that I wasn't sure how to answer. Okay.
And Dad, before I forget,
yes.
Melanie was asking how to answer the question that they previously asked, and they followed it up later, and I just missed it, saying that their friends were saying that the executive branch was the most powerful and talking about how it's changed over the years. I was confused because I didn't remember discussing that in class.
We have never discussed that in class. The rankings or the order of power. No. Now, if you were a senior in high school and you were in my government class, I've taught government to high school seniors, then we would talk about the evolution of the 3 branches of government. But we've never, as far as I know, we've never had that conversation in my class, and it's not on the study guide, and it's not anything. I can't even remember why that would possibly be. So, Melanie, it's not even a thing. Not even a thing.
All right, the next question we have is from Charlotte asking, are we allowed to use the internet to clarify and find some answers for the study guide / written notes?
No, you may only use your notes. That's it. That's all you can use, your hand written notes. You're not allowed to access Google or anything else. The only thing online that you're allowed to access is the formative, which is to take the test.
I think Charlotte, I don't know what they meant, but Charlotte, I think maybe asking tonight,
Oh,
are
yeah,
they
please.
allowed to use it?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes. Just not on the actual test. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ippolito, by the way. You're doing a great job of helping to moderate behind the scenes. Okay. And then a couple more questions that have come up. Mr. Ippolito, can you let me know where the federal system Venn diagram is? Also, will the federal system questions only be on the Venn diagram you gave us? So the federal system questions will be based on what we learned in that lesson that day, and also from, as I mentioned very clearly in all of our classes, there's no one Venn diagram that covers all of it. So what I'm recommending, the one that I shared with you, the one that I posted on Google Classroom, is a great one. I feel like the best one is like what I said in class, page 142 in the textbook is probably the best Venn diagram, federalism Venn diagram. The best way to figure out all the powers of Congress is to read the Constitution, or the powers of the judicial branch, or the powers of the executive branch. But that Venn diagram, like there's no authority or power that rests in a Venn diagram. It's just a summary of what the Constitution says, right? So the best place to go is the Constitution. The second best place would be to use multiple Venn diagrams to determine that. Use the activity, because we went over like 25 different examples. So use the activity that we did in class, that federal system. It's called the federal system with federalism in parentheses. And we did that, like we spent a good 30 minutes on that in class. And so that is the best activity to use. And if you're asking what is the best Venn diagram to look at, page 142 in the textbook. Next question, can you go over the necessary and proper clause? Yes. Now we have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to talk about it very, very briefly. But I'm going to share with you where you can go for more information. So, no. Okay. So for more information, if we run out of time, powers of the federal government, this 8-minute video, I do such a good job of talking about both the powers of the United States government, powers of Congress under Article 1, Section 8, as well as the necessary and proper clause. But let me just tell you what this means. The necessary and proper clause is the final part of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that gives Congress its power, gives the United States government its power. And essentially that says that the United States government Congress shall have the power to make any laws that are necessary and proper for the functioning of the government, right? So I'll give you an example. The Hoover Dam, which is an example I used in the video. The Hoover Dam was built in the 1930s to provide hydroelectric power for the people in that area of the United States. It's in Nevada. It is near Las Vegas. Some of you may have visited it at one time. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says the United States government can create a dam for hydroelectric power. They could not even conceive of building this huge dam for hydroelectric power. So it doesn't mention in the Constitution, but is electricity a vital part of carrying out the functions of our government today? Absolutely. And so we take that elastic clause, the necessary and proper clause, and stretch the powers of Congress. Every time we do something that's not specifically in the Constitution, we stretch it a little bit more, because we say, you know what, this thing that Congress is authorizing is necessary and proper to have a good quality of life, a more perfect union, to promote the general welfare, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. So things like the Affordable Care Act, right? Obamacare. Nowhere in the Constitution to talk about healthcare. This has been very controversial in the past few years. Should the United States government play a role in providing healthcare to Americans? Does it promote the general welfare? Yes. Is it mentioned specifically in the Constitution? No. So there's been a constitutional battle over whether or not it is legal and constitutional for the federal government to provide a structure for health insurance like the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. It has gone to the Supreme Court twice, or 3 times. Twice, the Affordable Care Act as a whole has been upheld. The individual mandate was struck down. That's more details than you need. But essentially, the United States Supreme Court has said that the necessary and proper clause covers Obamacare. It covers the Hoover Dam. It covers things like that were not even conceived of by the original framers of the Constitution. That is the necessary and proper clause. Okay, Libby, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else? Libby?
I saw a question asking, are there any dates we need to remember for the test?
The most important dates so far that we've gone over are July 4th, 1776 and 1787, which is the year the Constitution was written. So I'm really not one of those teachers who's like, you need to remember this list of 20 dates. I'm not really that teacher. So I think the most important date probably for this test is 1787, which is when the Constitution was written. So, all right. Well, Libby, it is now 8 o'clock and I still need to drive another 3 hours to get home. And these students need to study some more and get to bed early and get a good night's sleep. And so, hey, can you please, if you're still watching, we have several students who are still watching, can you please give a shout out to Libby and to Mrs. Ippolito in the chat, show them some love. Thank you so much. And gosh, I've given you a ton of resources, bookets, the YouTube videos, so many resources. So hopefully you're going to be ready. Again, don't stay up too late studying. At this point, you've really been studying this over the past quarter, right? So maybe a little bit more study tonight, and that should be it. So once again, another big shout out to Mr. McMahon. Thank you, Mr. McMahon, for hosting tonight. I would not have been able to do this. I would have been like sitting in the corner of a Starbucks trying to do this on my little laptop if Mr. McMahon had not come and saved the day. So yes, shout out to Libby. Thank you, Mr. McMahon, to Hanford West High School. And thank you for being on tonight and asking such great questions in the YouTube chat and on email. So thank you so much. Have a good evening, and I will see you either tomorrow or Friday for the quarter one final exam. Thanks so much. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.